In a world hidden beneath the heavy cloak of twilight, where shadows danced freely and the moon whispered secrets to the silent earth, there lived a being not quite ghost, not quite fairy. Her name was Elara, a spirit of the twilight, formless to the human eye, yet as real as the wind that rustled the autumn leaves. Elara drifted through the forest of Eldwin, a realm forgotten by time and untouched by human hands, her existence a lonely whisper among the ancient trees. For centuries, Elara watched from the shadows, her essence intertwined with the mists that rose at dusk and faded at dawn. She knew every creature, every whisper of the wind, every secret path that snaked through her woodland home. Yet, for all her knowledge, she felt an emptiness, a yearning for something, or someone, that even time itself seemed unable to fill. On a night painted with the silver glow of a full moon, Elara's curiosity drew her to the edge of her woodland realm. The boundary, marked by the oldest oak tree in Eldwin, stood as a silent sentinel between the known and the unknown. Beyond it lay the world of humans, a world she had observed from afar but never dared to enter. Tonight something was different, a pull, a call so tender and poignant it tugged at her very essence. Compelled by this unseen force, Elara crossed the boundary for the first time. The forest behind her whispered warnings, the trees groaning under the weight of age-old secrets, but she pressed forward, her form shimmering with ethereal light. As she ventured beyond the natural wilds of Eldwin, the chaotic beauty of human life unfolded before her. Lights flickered in the distance, sounds of laughter and sorrow mingled in the air, and the scent of wood smoke and autumn air wrapped around her like a warm shawl. Drawn to the liveliness of a nearby town, Elara found herself on the outskirts, where the forest gently kissed the edges of civilization. Houses dotted the landscape, their windows glowing with the warmth of life inside. It was here in this serene suburbia that she first saw him, James, a solitary figure sitting on the porch of a quaint blue house, his eyes fixed on the stars above. James was unlike any human she had ever observed. There was a sadness about him, a loneliness that mirrored her own. Night after night she returned, unseen and unknown, drawn irresistibly to the human who gazed at the stars as if searching for answers in the heavens. Elara, in her spectral form, could feel the weight of his loneliness, a resonance so deep it bridged the gap between spirit and man. Curiosity turned to fascination, and fascination to something far deeper as the nights grew colder and the leaves began to turn. Elara learned his habits, his hopes. As autumn deepened, the air became crisper, and the connection between Elara and James grew stronger. Each night, Elara's form fluttered more vividly as she drew closer to the human world, her essence slowly gaining a hint of solidity in the moonlit hours. Her curiosity about James deepened as she watched him wrestle with his solitude, pouring his heart into the pages of a worn leather journal each evening. James, a writer by passion and a librarian by day, had moved to the outskirts of town to escape the noise and demands of city life. His new home, surrounded by the encroaching forest, offered him the silence he thought he desired, yet it also steeped him in solitude deeper than he had anticipated. As the leaves turned from gold to fiery red, his loneliness became a tangible presence on the porch where he sat each night. One crisp evening, as Elara hovered near, the wind carried snippets of James's murmured words to her. He was reciting a poem about a lost spirit, a being of light who wandered the world unseen and unloved. The poignancy of his words struck a chord in Elara's non-corporeal heart. It was as if he spoke of her, though they had never truly met. Moved by his expression of loneliness, Elara made a decision that would alter the fabric of her existence. Harnessing the mystical energies of the twilight, she began to craft for herself a form, delicate and temporary, woven from moonlight and shadows, so that she might interact with the human who had unknowingly captured her ethereal heart. The transformation was slow and laborious. Each night, she wove her energies tighter, her form becoming gradually more visible to the human eye. As the moon waned towards the new cycle, she appeared before James for the first time as a flicker, a brief flash of light that caught his eye. Startled, he looked up, but saw only the swaying branches and the retreating mist. Encouraged by his reaction, Elara continued her efforts. By the time the moon was a thin crescent in the sky, she stood on his porch, a shimmering figure, barely visible yet unmistakably there. James, feeling the chill of the air and an inexplicable pull, stepped outside. His eyes widened as he saw her, a spectral woman, her figure aglow with the soft luminescence of starlight. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of awe and fear. "I am Elara," she replied, her voice a gentle echo, like the wind passing through leaves. "I have watched you from afar, drawn by your words and your solitude." James listened, mesmerized by the apparition before him. As they talked, he learned of her world, a world of twilight and whispers, of shadows and soft glows. Elara, in turn, discovered his world through his stories, his hopes, and his dreams penned in his journal. Their nightly meetings became the highlight of their existence, a secret shared between two worlds. As the season edged towards winter, their bond deepened, each finding in the other a solace they had longed for but never thought to find. With each passing night, Elara's ability to maintain her human-like form grew stronger, her presence on the earthly plane more stable and vivid. The transformation was miraculous, fueled by her deepening emotions and the magic of the twilight woods. The forest itself seemed to respond to Elara's metamorphosis, the ancient trees whispering encouragement, their leaves shimmering with a mystical frost under the starlit sky. James, too, changed. The loneliness that had once clouded his days began to dissipate, replaced by an invigorating sense of purpose and wonder. He found himself eagerly awaiting the fall of night, when the boundaries between his world and Elara's blurred into insignificance. His writings took on new depth, inspired by the tales and truths Elara shared about her ethereal existence. Their conversations unfolded into the late hours, filled with stories of ancient times when the boundaries between the human and the mystical were not so rigid. Elara spoke of Eldwin's past, of battles fought over the magic that thrummed beneath the soil and the stars that guided the destinies of both spirits and men. James soaked in every word, his imagination alight with possibilities, his heart moved by the beauty and tragedy of her tales. One night, as winter's first snow began to fall, casting a hush over the world, James introduced Elara to the concept of music. He brought out an old guitar, its strings worn but its sound warm and inviting. As he played, the notes floated around them, weaving through Elara's form like threads of light. The music touched her in a way she had never experienced, its vibrations reaching deep into her spirit essence. The song James chose was an old folk tune, its lyrics speaking of love and loss, of waiting and finding. The melody resonated with Elara, each chord echoing the tumultuous joy and fear in her heart. For the first time, she wondered about the consequences of their unlikely connection. Could a spirit truly belong in the human world? The thought lingered, a poignant melody in the back of her mind. Compelled by the music and moved by her own evolving feelings, Elara attempted something she had never dared before. Concentrating on the energy around her, she reached out and touched James's hand. Her touch was faint, like a breeze against his skin, but to both, it was a profound moment. The first true physical interaction between them. The connection sparked a new layer of intimacy in their relationship. They began to explore more of each other's worlds. James took Elara into the town under the veil of night, showing her the twinkling lights of civilization, the laughter of people gathered in warmth, the quiet peace of a world asleep. For Elara, these excursions were dazzling, each new sight and sound a treasure to be stored in her heart. Meanwhile, Elara led James into deeper parts of Eldwin. They visited glens lit by fireflies, where the air was thick with magic, and streams that sang with the purity of the ancient earth. James witnessed wonders he had only ever dreamed of. His eyes opened to a reality that was both fantastic and overwhelmingly beautiful. As the winter deepened, so did their bond, each finding in the other a reflection of their own heart's desires and fears. Yet the question of their future loomed large, as mysterious and fateful as the stars above. As the winter solstice approached, the world seemed to hold its breath, the nights reaching their longest stretch. The darkness was thick, woven with cold and whispers of ancient rites. In Eldwin, this time was of great significance, marking a period when the veil between realms was thinnest, and magic pulsed with unchecked force through the land. Ilara, now nearly solid in her twilight form, felt the surge of ancient power flowing through the forest. She knew this was a crucial moment for both her and James. The solstice could be a gateway to new possibilities or the harbinger of an inevitable parting. She shared these thoughts with James, who listened, his heart heavy with the weight of impending decisions. Determined to forge a path forward together, they decided to perform a solstice ritual that Ilara remembered from the whispers of the oldest trees. It was said to bind the spirits of the forest with the souls of mortals, creating a harmony between them. Though neither knew if the ritual could indeed blend their worlds permanently, they were willing to take the chance, driven by the love that had blossomed between them. On the eve of the solstice, under a sky bursting with stars, they prepared the ritual in a clearing encircled by ancient oaks. James gathered materials from the town, candles for light, incense for air, stones for earth, and water from the purest spring in Eldwin. Ilara contributed with her own essence, weaving strands of twilight into the circle, infusing it with the magic of her realm. As the moon climbed to its zenith, they began the ritual. James lit the candles, their flames flickering against the darkness, casting elongated shadows across the snow. He then placed the stones in a pattern guided by Ilara, each one resonating with an ancient energy that pulsed under his fingers. Together they poured the spring water into a shallow basin at the center of the circle, the liquid catching the moon's silver reflection. Ilara chanted in the forgotten language of the forest, her voice a melody that seemed to sway with the breeze. James repeated each word after her, feeling the weight and power of the sounds in his mouth, a language that was both alien and familiar. As the ritual neared its completion, Ilara and James joined hands, their fingers intertwining. The air around them thickened, sparkling with motes of light that swirled faster and faster. The boundary between their beings blurred, Ilara's luminescent form merging with James's solid presence. A warmth spread through them, a sense of completion, as if two halves of a long fractured whole were finally coming together. When the last word of the chant was spoken, a profound silence fell over the clearing. The candles sputtered out, and the incense smoke drifted lazily towards the heavens. They stood still, eyes locked, each breathing heavily from the intensity of the ritual. As the first light of dawn tinged the horizon, something miraculous happened. Ilara's form, once ethereal and flickering, stabilized into a permanent, solid presence. She could feel the cold of the snow under her feet, the warmth of James's hand in hers. Tears welled in her eyes as she realized the ritual had succeeded. She was no longer just a spirit of the twilight, but a being of both shadow and substance. Overwhelmed with joy and relief, they embraced, their hearts beating in a rhythm that echoed through the waking forest. The solstice had indeed been a beginning, not an end, a promise of a shared future, entwined and unbreakable. As the sun rose, casting golden light through the trees, James and Ilara stepped forward together, ready to explore the new world that awaited them, a world where magic and love had rewritten their fates. With the dawn of the new day following the solstice, Ilara and James discovered the full extent of the transformation. Ilara, once bound to the ethereal twilight, now found herself anchored in the physical world, her senses alive with experiences she had only ever observed from the periphery. The morning was crisp, and the forest around them sparkled with frost. Ilara took her first true breaths, the cold air sharp and invigorating against her lungs. The sensation was overwhelming, and she laughed, a clear, melodious sound that echoed against the trees, startling a nearby flock of birds into flight. James watched her with a mix of awe and deep affection, marveling at how the ritual had irrevocably changed the fabric of their realities. They spent the day exploring the tangible aspects of the world together. Elara was fascinated by the simplest sensations: the texture of tree bark under her fingertips, the crunch of snow beneath her boots, the warmth of sunlight as it filtered through the bare branches. Everything was a discovery, and James found new joy in the familiar as he experienced it anew through Elara's eyes. As the day unfolded, they discussed their future. With Elara now a part of the physical world, they were free to explore beyond the boundaries of Eldwin. The idea of traveling together, of seeing the world beyond the forest and the small town, was exhilarating. James suggested a journey to the coast, a place he had described to Elara in their nocturnal talks, but she had never seen. The thought of witnessing the vastness of the ocean, of hearing the crash of waves and smelling the salt in the air, filled Elara with an eager anticipation. However, their plans were tempered by the realization of the challenges ahead. Elara, new to her physical form, needed to learn the ways of the human world, how to interact with others, how to navigate the complexities of society, and how to manage the mundane tasks that James took for granted. They decided to start small, with short trips into town, gradually introducing Elara to the community as a distant relative of James who had come to live with him. Their first visit was to the local market. The bustle of people, the array of colors and smells from the stalls selling everything from fresh produce to handmade crafts, was almost overwhelming for Elara. She clung to James's arm, her eyes wide with wonder and a slight nervousness. James, protective and proud, guided her gently, introducing her to some familiar faces, delighting in her reactions, and explaining the various items for sale. One elderly woman, Mrs. Dalton, who ran a stall of homemade jams and jellies, noticed Elara's accent, ethereal and unlike anything she had heard before. Her curiosity piqued. She engaged Elara in conversation, and Elara, drawing upon the confidence her love for James gave her, responded with a grace that belied her inexperience. James watched, his heart swelling with pride, as Elara charmed Mrs. Dalton with her genuine interest and polite inquiries. As the weeks turned into months, Elara's confidence grew. She and James visited libraries, museums, and parks, each outing designed to further Elara's understanding and comfort in her new world. James chronicled their adventures, his writings now filled with hope and colored by the love they shared. Their plans for the journey to the coast took shape, and as winter melted into spring, they prepared to set out. The trip symbolized more than just a physical journey. It was a testament to their growth together, a celebration of the new life they had forged from the mystical and the mundane. As they packed their bags, looking forward to the horizon and the endless sea beyond, they were unaware that back in Eldwin, the forest was stirring. The ancient magic, disrupted by Elara's transformation, was slowly reawakening, its energies seeking a new equilibrium. This resurgence was set to test their bond in ways they had not yet imagined, promising not just trials, but also deeper revelations about the power of their union. As spring unfurled its vibrant hues across the land, James and Elara set off on their journey to the coast. The world outside Eldwin was a tapestry of landscapes, each different from the last, full of vibrant cities, quiet villages, and wild, untouched spaces that thrilled Elara with their beauty and diversity. Each mile traveled was a revelation, an accumulation of shared moments and discoveries that wove deeper layers into the fabric of their relationship. Upon reaching the coastline, the sight of the ocean struck Elara with awe. The expanse of blue stretching to the horizon where sky and water melded in a dance of shifting colors seemed infinite. The sounds of the sea, the rhythmic crashing of waves, the calls of seabirds, the whisper of the salt-laden wind enveloped her in a sensory embrace. Standing on the sandy beach, she felt the pull of the tides, an echo of the magical forces she was once part of, resonating through her newly solid form. Their days at the coast were filled with explorations along the shoreline, collecting shells and watching the sun rise and set over the vast ocean. James took pleasure in teaching Elara to swim, an experience that delighted her with the new sensation of buoyancy and the playful resistance of water. During these blissful days, their love deepened, grounded in shared experiences and the joy of discovery. However, This idyllic period was shadowed by subtle signs of change. Alara began to notice a strange sensation within herself, a stirring of the magic that still lingered in her veins. It pulsed with the tides, stronger by the night, aligning with the lunar cycles. She kept these observations to herself, uncertain of what they meant or how to share them without causing James concern. One night, under a full moon, the latent power within Alara surged unexpectedly. As they walked along the beach, her footsteps began to glow faintly, leaving shimmering imprints in the wet sand. James, observing this, stopped in his tracks, his expression a mixture of fascination and worry. "Alara, what's happening?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Alara looked at her glowing steps, then at James, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I don't fully understand it myself, James. It seems the magic that allowed me to be here. It's still part of me, perhaps more deeply entwined than we realized." The phenomenon sparked a series of discussions about what this meant for their future. They realized that while the ritual had granted Alara a physical form, the essence of her being was still fundamentally connected to the mystical forces of her original realm. This connection could not be severed entirely, and it was beginning to assert itself in ways they hadn't anticipated. Determined to understand these changes, James proposed that they return to Eldwin for guidance. Perhaps the ancient magic of the forest, the wisdom of the oldest trees, could offer insight into Alara's condition and help stabilize her transformation. Their return journey was a mix of urgency and contemplation. Alara felt a pull towards the forest, a longing for the familiar whispers of the twilight realm. As they neared Eldwin, the sensations grew stronger, almost overwhelming, as if the forest itself was calling her home. When they finally crossed back into the mystical woods of Eldwin, the forest welcomed them with open arms. The trees swayed as if in greeting, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of blossoms. It was here, surrounded by the ancient magic of her homeland, that they hoped to find answers, and perhaps a way to ensure their future together would remain unthreatened by the unpredictable tides of magic and change. Upon their return to the mystical embrace of Eldwin, Alara and James sought the counsel of the eldest entity within the forest, a being known simply as the Arbiter, a sentient tree whose roots delve deep into the earth, tapping into ancient sources of wisdom and power. The Arbiter was said to predate the memory of the oldest living trees in the forest, and held knowledge of the very fabric of magical law. The journey to the Arbiter took them deep into the heart of Eldwin, where the trees grew taller and the air thrummed with an unseen energy. The path was less a trail and more an intuitive following of subtle signs, a slightly brighter patch of moss, a whispering breeze that seemed to suggest a direction, a sequence of bird calls that felt like instructions. As they approached the Arbiter, the forest's ambiance shifted. The light dimmed, filtered through ancient canopies into beams that spotlighted their path. The ground beneath their feet felt alive, pulsating with a slow, steady rhythm like the beating of a great heart. Standing before the Arbiter, they were struck by its immense size and the deep, resonant energy that seemed to emanate from its bark. The tree's vast trunk was encrusted with lichens and mosses, and its branches stretched skyward, entwining with the energy of the world. Alara stepped forward, placing her palms against the cool, rough bark. She closed her eyes and spoke in the ancient tongue of the forest, her words flowing like a melody. The Arbiter responded not in spoken language, but through a connection that vibrated through Alara's being, images, emotions, and deep, resonant thoughts that filled her mind. The Arbiter conveyed that Alara's transformation was both a culmination of ancient prophecy and a new beginning for the mystical energies of Eldwin. Her bond with James had altered the fabric of magic, blending human and twilight energies in unprecedented ways. This blend was both a source of her newfound abilities and a potential point of instability that could ripple through the realms. Understanding dawned on Alara and James, that their love had not only transformed them, but also had the potential to reshape the balance between the mystical and the mortal worlds. The Arbiter imparted knowledge of a ritual that could stabilize Alara's magic, ensuring her existence remained anchored in the physical world without continuous fluctuations caused by the lunar cycles. However, The ritual required them to gather rare components, the dew from the first bloom of a moonflower, known to bloom only under the light of a new moon, ashes from a phoenix tree, a rare plant that burned and rebirthed itself every century, and a fragment of a fallen star embodying the celestial energies that had first called Elara to the human realm. Armed with this knowledge, Elara and James set out to collect these items, their journey transforming from one of personal exploration to a quest that held implications for the balance of their worlds. As they prepared to leave the Arbiter, the ancient tree bestowed upon them a blessing, its leaves rustling with a sound like distant applause, imbuing them with a sense of purpose and protection. Their quest was not just about securing their future, but also about preserving the harmony between the human and mystical realms. Each step forward was a step into the unknown, guided by love and the ancient magic of Eldwin. Elara and James embarked on their quest under the watchful eyes of the twilight stars, their spirits buoyed by the Arbiter's blessing. The first item on their list, the dew from the first bloom of a moonflower, was rumored to be found in the Luminous Grove, a secluded glen in Eldwin, where moonlight seemed to gather and pool as if it were liquid. Navigating the grove by the ethereal light of the full moon, they found the moonflowers in full splendor, their petals unfolding like radiant silver sails. The dew they collected glimmered with a pale light, each drop a concentrated essence of moonlit magic. Elara, with her innate connection to the twilight, gently gathered the dew, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the night-blooming flora. Next, they sought the ashes of the phoenix tree, a task that would take them beyond the borders of Eldwin into the Fireleaf Valley, known for its volcanic activity and the rare botanical life that thrived in its fertile soil. The journey was perilous, the path often obscured by volcanic ash and unpredictable eruptions. In Fireleaf Valley, the phoenix trees were a sight to behold. Tall and stark against the smoldering landscape, their bark resembling molten silver. Every century, as the trees reached the end of their life cycle, they ignited in a brilliant pyre, only to be reborn from their ashes. James and Elara arrived just as one such tree was undergoing its rebirth, the air thick with heat and the scent of scorched earth. Gathering the ashes required courage and precision, as they had to wait for the flames to subside while ensuring the ashes were still imbued with the tree's fiery essence. With 2 components secured, they turned their quest towards the final, most elusive item, a fragment of a fallen star. Such fragments were known to fall in the Whispering Dunes, a vast desert where the sky stretched endless and clear, a perfect canvas for celestial events. The journey was long and arduous, the desert landscape a stark contrast to the lush verdancy of Eldwin. By day, the sun was relentless, and by night, the temperature dropped precipitously, the only constants being the sand underfoot and the stars above. After nights of searching, guided by the constellations and Elara's fading yet still potent connection to the celestial energies, they finally found a small crater. At its center lay a star fragment, still warm from its journey through the heavens. The fragment pulsed with a raw, powerful energy, its surface shimmering with the colors of the cosmos. Handling it required great care, as its energy was potent and wild, untamed by the earthly touch. With all 3 components in hand, Elara and James returned to Eldwin, their hearts full of hope, but also a sense of foreboding. They had completed the quest, but the ritual that awaited them held the power to alter their lives and the balance of the world itself. The Arbiter had warned them that the ritual was as much a test of their bond and will as it was a magical procedure. Preparing for the ritual, they returned to the clearing where their transformative journey had begun. Under the watchful gaze of the Arbiter and the ancient denizens of the forest, they arranged the components with care, each item placed according to the sacred geometries of old. The moon was rising, a thin crescent that cast a gentle silver glow over the forest. As they began the ritual, the elements of the forest seemed to lean in, the air thick with anticipation. Elara and James stood at the heart of the circle, their hands linked, their voices mingling in a chant that rose and fell with the wind. The ground beneath them hummed with energy, the components glowing, their powers intertwining in a dance of creation and transformation. Tonight, under the crescent moon, they would weave together the forces of life, magic, and love, hoping to secure a future where both could thrive without boundaries. The outcome of this ritual would not only define the fabric of their lives, but also the balance between the human and mystical realms for generations to come. As the crescent moon ascended, its silvery light casting a spectral glow over the clearing, Ilara and James began the ritual with a profound sense of purpose. They stood within the circle they had drawn on the forest floor, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to watch over them like silent guardians. The air was charged with a palpable energy, each breath they took laden with the weight of centuries. The ritual commenced with the invocation of the elements, a tradition as old as the forest itself. Ilara, her voice steady and clear, called upon the earth, her words resonating with the deep, rich tones of the soil and roots around them. James invoked the air, his words fluttering like leaves caught in a gentle breeze. Together, they summoned the essence of water, the murmuring of nearby streams weaving into their chant, and finally, fire, acknowledged by the glow of the phoenix tree ashes that flickered as if still alive with flame. Next, they carefully placed the moonflower dew in the basin at the center of the circle, its luminescence spreading like a pool of starlight. The phoenix ashes were sprinkled over the dew, the combination sparking with a sudden intensity that briefly illuminated the clearing. Lastly, Ilara held the star fragment above the basin, allowing its cosmic energy to drip slowly into the mixture, each drop a miniature explosion of light. As the final drop fell, the ground beneath them began to tremble, a soft hum growing to a resonant throbbing that echoed through their bones. The trees swayed, and the wind picked up, whispering secrets in a language only the forest could understand. Ilara and James, hands still joined, focused their energies into the heart of the ritual, their thoughts and desires intertwining with the magic they were channeling. By the power of the gathered elements, by the ancient magic of Eldwin, and by the bond that ties our souls, Ilara intoned, her voice rising above the growing wind, and by the love that brought us together, crossing realms and reshaping destinies, James continued, his voice firm and full of emotion. We call upon these sacred powers to bind and bless, to stabilize and secure, they said together, the words a powerful incantation that seemed to draw the very stars down from the sky. At that moment, the star fragment began to levitate, spinning slowly as it rose above the basin. The phoenix ashes swirled around it, and the moonflower dew shimmered brightly beneath. A beam of moonlight shot down from the crescent above, hitting the fragment, which burst into a dazzling radiance that enveloped Ilara and James. The light was blinding, and within its brilliance, they felt themselves changing. Ilara's connection to the twilight and the celestial realm solidified, anchoring her firmly to the physical world, yet retaining her mystical essence. For James, the ritual deepened his ties to the magical, his human soul now imbued with a trace of Eldwin's ancient power. As the light faded, they found themselves still standing, transformed and more deeply bonded than ever before. The forest around them settled, the magical energies dispersing gently into the night air. Their hearts filled with a mix of awe and relief. Ilara and James knew that they had succeeded in their goal. They had not only secured Ilara's place in the physical world, but had also forged a new legacy for the interaction between the human and mystical realms, a legacy that promised a future of coexistence and mutual respect. The ritual had marked a beginning, not an end to their adventures. With their newfound union of powers, they looked forward to exploring both the magical and the mundane worlds, guardians of a balance they had fought so hard to achieve. The crescent moon, witness to their commitment, seemed to smile down upon them, a sliver of light in the dark sky heralding the dawn of a new era. In the aftermath of the ritual, the world around Ilara and James was transformed. The forest of Eldwin seemed alive with a new vibrancy, its colors more vivid, its sounds sharper. The magic of the land, now intertwined with human energies through their union, had evolved. The creatures of the forest, both seen and unseen, appeared more frequently, unafraid and curious about the changes that had taken place. As spring gave way to summer, Eldwin and James took to exploring their roles as bridge builders between the two realms. They organized gatherings where beings of Eldwin could interact safely with selected humans who were open and sensitive to the existence of magical realities. These meetings took place in the depths of the forest under the canopy of twilight, a time when the veil between worlds naturally thinned. During one such gathering, they introduced a group of human artists, writers, and thinkers to the ethereal sprites and wise old trees of Eldwin. The exchange was fruitful, sparking a series of artworks, stories, and philosophies that began to integrate the mystical into the everyday. This cultural fusion slowly spread beyond the immediate circle, inspiring a broader acceptance and understanding of the mystical world among humans. Meanwhile, Eldwin developed her ability to manipulate her form and essence, learning to channel the energies she drew from both the celestial and the earthly realms. She could now cause blooms to flourish with a mere touch or mend wounded animals with her whispered chants. James, with his newly imbued magical sensitivity, wrote extensively about their experiences, his books becoming a bridge in their own right, educating those who were unaware of the magical dimensions parallel to their own. The balance they had achieved also allowed them to venture further than before. They traveled beyond Eldwin to distant lands, discovering other points where the mystical and the human intersected. In some places they found harmony, in others, discord. Each location was a lesson, an opportunity to learn and perhaps to heal. On one such journey, they visited the Shimmering Isles, a series of small islands said to vanish and reappear with the tides. The islands were home to the Mirror-wraiths, ethereal beings of water and mist, whose existence was believed to be a myth until Eldwin and James documented their interactions. The Mirror-wraiths, understanding the couple's unique bond and purpose, shared ancient lore about the tidal flows of magic, adding another layer of depth to their understanding of the mystical network that connected the world. Back in Eldwin, they used this knowledge to create a sanctuary, a place where magical beings and humans could learn from each other in peace. The sanctuary grew, supported by the alliances they forged, and became a model for other regions. Eldwin and James's efforts showed that coexistence was not only possible, but beneficial for both realms. As years passed, their lives became a testament to the power of unity and the strength of love. They were not without challenges, but each obstacle was met with the combined force of their courage and creativity. The legacy they were building was one of hope, a beacon for future generations that might one day traverse the paths between worlds as freely as they did. In the twilight of their years, they looked back on a life rich with achievement and adventure, knowing they had altered the course of history for both humans and the mystical folk of Eldwin. Under a sky streaked with the colors of sunset, they walked hand in hand, their path lined with the blooming flowers of a world forever changed by their love and dedication. A world where the lonely whispers of the past had transformed into a symphony of voices, singing together in harmony.